Michigan Liberation is a statewide network of people and organizations organizing to end the criminalization of Black families and communities of color in Michigan. We envision a state without mass incarceration, mass policing, and punishment. We envision a state with the best public education in the nation, single-payer health care, and thriving Black and Brown communities. Here on the Respect the Roots podcast, we will lift up the stories and experiences of those impacted by mass incarceration, collective ties to the criminal legal system, and the frontline efforts to end mass incarceration.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Michigan Liberation's Respect the Roots podcast. Make sure to check us out on Xfinity Cable. I always make that mistake. You guys know that. Wow Cable, and also podcast platforms, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Pandora. Also, remember to check us out on social media at My Liberation. Well, today, this is the second part. I'm here with Kate Boulton. Hey, Kate, how you doing?
Hello.
She
Hi.
still, she didn't hang up from me. She didn't leave me.
No.
We were having a great little conversation, but Kate was more so schooling us about this, oh my gosh, I don't even know where to begin. First of all, Kate, before I get started, before we were going to talk about the overdose crisis that is going on, but I want to first of all, Kate is an amazing. Her bio is like amazing. She's graduated from Harvard, U of M, boop, boop, champion. Okay, what all that good stuff. I mean, she is the senior legal technical advisor at Vital Strategies Overdose Prevention Program, and so she's an amazing legal and public health professional. So it made sense just to have you come back for part two, Kate. And we talked about some good stuff in part one. And Kate, thank you so much. Thank you so much. But please, can you go over like you did in the first part, the overdose statistics? And please, because I think this is so critical and so crucial. And then kind of tell us about vital strategies and disparities that you're seeing in this work.
Yeah, of course. And thank you so much. I'm grateful to be here for part two and continue our conversation. It is so exciting to be able to talk about this with you, and I'm just deeply appreciative. But yeah, to kick us off, we can just sort of paint a picture of the sort of public health emergency that we're in the midst of. And I call it emergency. We often call it a crisis, but the fact of the matter is, more than 100,000 people died of overdose in 2021 for the first time. And so this is, a really disturbing and tragic milestone in terms of the increasing overdose that we've been seeing for some years in the United States. And part of that is the COVID pandemic intensifying overdose rates in many places in the United States. That's, partly because of, disruptions in services and supports for people in need of treatment or harm reduction services. Also because of, people experiencing more isolation during the pandemic. And so,
I can see that.
So, we're still in the midst of this crisis, and, Michigan has experienced similar trends. And so in 2021, over 3,000 people died of overdose in the state of Michigan. That's an average of over 2 people every hour. And, we are in dire need of different kinds of approaches to the overdose crisis than we have seen historically. Historically, we've largely seen an approach grounded in criminalization and punishment, and I know we'll talk more about that. But the other important thing to understand about the overdose crisis as it is today is the profound racial disparities that we see in terms of who is affected by the overdose crisis. So from 2019 to 2020, drug overdose rates increased by 44% among Black people and 39% among Indigenous folks in the US. In Michigan, overdose rates are higher among Black Michiganders. And, there are different reasons for this. I think one important factor is, of course, the role of criminalization. So communities of color disproportionately targeted and harmed across the criminal legal continuum, arrest, incarceration, criminal justice supervision, and that intensifies vulnerability to overdose and other poor health outcomes. Another factor is, disparities in access to treatment and other services. So, people of color in many communities are less likely to access evidence-based treatment that we know can help reduce risk of overdose. And so, these different factors lead to the widening disparities that we see in terms of who is impacted by overdose.
Wow, wow. So, hey, with that, it kind of leads us into the Care Not Criminalization campaign, Michigan Liberation, partner with Vital Strategies, and you guys definitely came in and showed us the ropes and have been supporting us from the beginning. Um, and what are some of the important priorities and demands that emerged from the Care Not Criminalization agenda? I know I saw like listening sessions and so forth, but what are some other things that took place?
Yeah, so the agenda emerged from this fantastic process of community listening sessions in Macomb, Oakland, and Kalamazoo counties, and so this was people out in the community hearing directly from folks about the problems that they're seeing and the solutions that they want to see to those problems, and so that feedback then informed the development of this incredible agenda. And, I think it's helpful to describe the sort of guiding principles for the Care Not Criminalization agenda. And so, um, it's holistic in terms of sort of recognizing the whole person needs of people affected by substance use overdose in these different systems. It is grounded in harm reduction, and I know we talked a lot about harm reduction in the last session,
Right.
but this is key and critical to Vital Strategies approach and philosophy. Um, the uh, the agenda focuses on healing rather than incarceration and punishment. Um, you know, uh,
That's deep. That's deep.
yes, it
Yeah.
is. It is. And finally, there is a need to destigmatize the way we think about, talk about, respond to people who use drugs. And we know stigma can kill. Um, it affects responses to people who use drugs in healthcare, the criminal legal system, families, and so it's an important element to consider as well. And some of the strategies, and I won't go over them all because it's a big agenda and it has a lot of incredible content in it. But I think some that I would highlight are the demand to transform the role of policing to really build
Mm.
out non-police response for substance use and mental health crises. So instead of, the police arriving and all of the attendant risks of negative outcomes from that, including lethal encounters
Yes.
with people with mental illness or otherwise struggling, non-police responders um, being available in that situation. And so we've seen these kinds of models cropping up in different places across the US, but the Care Not Crim agenda said, this is something we want to see in Michigan.
Right.
Um, some other priorities that I think are important are the creation and funding of community resources. So, syringe service programs where people can access sterile syringes and other supplies to protect themselves and promote health, overdose prevention sites, and trauma-informed mental health and substance use services. The Care Not Crime agenda also calls out the harms of discrimination against people who use drugs and people with substance use disorder. Um, and of course, as we've talked about a lot, and as the agenda tells us,
Right.
decriminalization is an important demand. So decriminalization of drug use, decriminalization of sex work, paraphernalia. Um, and so we know that, these kinds of changes in Michigan would be absolutely transformative. And, I know that the work continues at Michigan Live. And, it's exciting to imagine what can come next for the organization as it, carries forward the efforts around this agenda.
Wow. You said a lot, Kate. That's good. I for those of you who are listening, I'm talking to Kate Boulton from Vital Strategies, and Kate, there was a event last week at down at Wayne State that dealt with alternatives to policing,
Mm-hmm.
and and that was one of the things, calling people that are not, let's just say it, when you have a crisis, when you have people that are going through an episode, not calling the police. But a lot of people, they don't know this. Lack
Mm-hmm.
of knowledge, like I said in the first part, and this is awesome that we're partnering together through Care Not Criminalization and Vital Strategies to come up with these alternatives, you know. And it kind of leads me into my next little subtopic I want to talk about as far as engaging the community, mobilizing communities, but mainly as it deals to identifying needs and also talking about like opiate, settlement funds,
Mm-hmm.
how they're
Mm-hmm.
being used and getting into the more so that because like I mentioned offline, I've been to the listening sessions and they're great, and that's probably another podcast episode because I would love to go deep into that. But I know from the type of position that you have, you could definitely probably speak on that, like the
Mm-hmm.
opiate settlement funds and how they're being used, and kind of like the exciting directions for this type of work, I
Mm-hmm.
guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the opioid settlement funds are a sort of great example to use when thinking about ways in which a community can um, mobilize around community priorities, community needs, and what people on the ground want to see in terms of solutions. So, I think a lot of folks know that money is coming from opioid settlements, and it's a very kind of complicated legal landscape. But there's the big settlement, the distributor settlement, and from that settlement, I think around um, maybe 775 to $800 million will be coming to Michigan over the next
Wow.
18 years. So, significant resources intended to address the opioid crisis, opioid overdose crisis. And so that, of course, raises the question, well, how will Michigan use this money?
Exactly.
Mhm.
How are we gonna? What? Kate, come on. 800 million. How is this going to be itemized out? Who's going to get what?
Mhm. Mhm.
Who's going to make sure that it's spent properly?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's
Sorry about that.
that's the $800 million question. So I think um, it's there's a whole lot of activity in this space right now. A lot of resource creation. Um, something Vital Strategies is thinking a lot about is how do we demystify this whole opioid settlement thing for people in the community.
Right.
So you may be, in Michigan, maybe you work in this space, maybe you don't, but you're interested in it. And so money is coming, but you don't know sort of how, when, how is it going to be divvied up between the state and localities? What can it be spent on? What are the leverage points for sort of watching the process,
Right.
and for trying to promote accountability and transparency? And what do you do? Like, do you show up to meetings? Um, do you write um, grant proposals? Some states have like portals where you can actually submit proposals for funding. So it really looks different from state to state, and I think it's a real opportunity in Michigan, as elsewhere, for folks in community to watch and engage around how that funding is used, and really ensure that we go to the things that we know work, um, harm reduction, um,
Yes.
you know, really ensuring that funds are used in ways that are mindful of, uh, folks who are disproportionately impacted by overdose. So that includes um, BIPOC communities, but also people entangled in the criminal legal system, uh, and um, really being intentional about how those folks are not left behind, um, as the state and localities figure out, you know, the way that this money will be used.
Right. Now, offline, Kate, we talked about your role, your position, and I think this is key because I find it so interesting, cool. Your title is Senior Legal Technical Advisor to the Vital Strategies Overdose Prevention Program. Can you just give us a little idea of what that means? Everybody, I'm talking to Kate from Vital Strategies. If you're having a senior moment, you forgot Kate from Vital Strategy. She's a senior, not single. Sorry, Kate. Oh, wait, I'm single. Senior legal technical advisor. What does that mean? Hey, because I feel some legal stuff coming up here. We've been talking about doing all this work, but I'm sure there's some legal parameters.
That's right. Yes. And it is a mouthful. So I get it. But the way I would put it is I am a public health lawyer who really focuses on the intersection between criminalization and health. So, how,
Criminalization and health.
that's
Okay.
right. And how are they
Okay.
interacting? Um, so, over the past 7 years, I've worked on the sexual and reproductive health and rights of sex workers. I worked
Mm.
for some time on HIV criminalization. And of course, more recently at Vital Strategies, I focus on drug policy, especially drug policy in the criminal legal system. So, in terms of what a senior legal technical advisor is, it means that I lead the overdose prevention program's legal team. And so that's me and my colleague, Derek Carr. Shout him out. I know we like shout outs.
Yes.
Yes. So the two of us as the legal team provide legal and policy support to Vital's efforts across states. So, we talked about in the last session, we work in 7 different states, including Michigan. So, we provide support and guidance to the Vital Strategies teams who work in the different states, but also our partners. So that could include government partners, it could include community-based organizations. And, some examples of how that might look are, um, you know, providing some interpretation and guidance on naloxone access law for a harm reduction program that wants to give naloxone out to community members. So, you know, what are the ins and outs of distributing naloxone legally in state X? Or, maybe a state wants to overhaul its regulations on harm reduction programs and how they operate. So the legal team might provide some technical assistance and support on, the state's revising of its regulations to be more promotive of health and a harm reduction approach.
Wow.
Um, and the
Awesome.
last thing, yeah,
Awesome.
really exciting. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
No, I was wondering. No, I was getting excited. Like, do you
Mhm,
also play a role in also helping people, like, let's say, carrying out criminalization, because I'm
mhm,
part of Michigan Liberation,
mhm,
come up with ways on how to change and revise certain legal, parameters so you can maybe be more effective in your communities. Like maybe I'm not saying the right legal lingo, but is that kind of like part of it too? Kind of making sure, like for example, if I want to pass out, have Narcan vending machines, and maybe that's not, you know, legal right now in my area or my state.
mhm.
Maybe working to get that changed, that law changed. Is that kind of like to what you work on?
Yeah, I mean, we help people understand the sort of legal and policy landscape. And just to be clear, there are naloxone vending machines in Michigan, but we do help, community advocates and organizations understand um, what are the barriers to overdose prevention
Mm,
and harm reduction. And um, we don't lobby, but we do help people understand that landscape, what
okay,
the barriers are, and you know strategies to address those barriers.
I got you. I'm so glad you made that clear, you know, to address the barriers, but not necessarily do lobbying.
Mhm.
Okay.
Right.
That's good to know because some people get a little confused and, but that's good to know. That's good to know
Mhm.
because, like I said, knowledge is power. A lot of people don't know the law. That's why we
Mhm.
have you to help us
Mhm.
because we have good hearts. We have big hearts, in this type of work. But we got to keep in mind there's certain laws in place that we got to abide by, right? Would you say, Kate? Kind of like, and I know it's kind of, and I'm sure it's real a thin line because of this type of work, and the connection and correlation.
Yeah, and it's complicated. It's we in drug policy or people work in harm reduction, you're contending with federal law, state law, local ordinances, and all of those things, interact to create this sort of um, space that you have to pursue different kinds of strategies. And so um, understanding that variation um, and kind of that universe, for lack of a better word, can
Mhm.
be really key. And so we try to provide that support. And I want to say too, both in terms of vital strategies as a funder, because we of course provide grants, and then we provide this technical assistance. So we provide legal TA, but we also have our award-winning communications team, and I know you know Tony,
Shout out
and
to
also
Tony.
yes, that's right. And we have a sort of data and epidemiology team member who provides that kind of TA. But for both our grant making and our TA, we really strive to run alongside. And so, if we're funding an organization, whether that's Michigan Liberation or other partners, we want to be a real partner and co-conspirator in the work, um, and really um, try and have that guide us in terms of our approach. And the same goes for the TA that comes from me and my colleague Derek within the legal team of, the idea is not to sort of, you know, I tell you what the law is and walk away and good luck with sorting it out. It's really wanting
Right.
to give people capacity um, to interpret this often confusing environment in terms of law
Absolutely.
and policy. And then, people are then able to devise their own strategies and their own approaches for the way forward. So,
Well, on behalf of Michigan Liberation, Kate, and your team. You guys have done an amazing job. And I'm just not saying that because we're on a podcast taping. But no, I've been to the listening sessions. We got about 3 minutes. I told you this is go by so fast. See, part three in the making. But no, thank you. I've sat in on listening sessions. I was there when Care Not Criminalization put their booklet together, and now as they're getting ready to build their, their other, projects, which we'll be probably talking about in another podcast episodes, as this money is coming available, and coming with solutions to our lovely government here in Michigan to come up with some strategies, or some support, advice, kind of like, hey, we've listened to the people. This is what they saying they need, So thank you so much, Kate, for your work. Everybody, Tony, just everybody on your team. You guys are amazing. That's why I was like, I had to have you guys come on a podcast and talk about this. And it's so many other topics I know we're going to cover. This is just a tip of, this is just a, we're just slightly getting started, right?
Yeah, yeah, just the
Yeah, but
surface. Yeah.
yeah, we're just scratching the surface. And you're from Michigan, so we love you. Anyway. Oh, okay, Kate, real quick before we head out. What side are you representing when it comes to Michigan or Metro Detroit area? West side or east side?
East side.
She's representing east side. Everybody knows.
Yes.
I mean, if you're not from Michigan or the Metro Detroit area, everybody knows that we're very particular about what side. And it's not so much Detroit, it's just even the east part, like suburbs or whatever. I don't care if it's Rose Point or East Point or Hazel Park or I don't know, even some of those other areas out there, But and if you say west, then we know it's Southfield and all these other West Bloomfield and
Yeah.
all this other stuff. So I represent the west side. So we still love each other, but it's so
That's right.
funny how you're way in New Mexico and you still know what I meant.
Yes.
I'm gonna talk but no, it's all great love and it's been a great partnership. So we're so excited, to continue this work. Any food for thought before we head out, before we go on our daily hey, work schedule or whatever. Anything you want to say. I want to talk about listening sessions on one podcast episode, if you don't mind. I don't know if you want to sit in on that one, but I'll talk to some of your colleagues, Kate. We got a minute before we wrap it up. Anything you want to say to anybody out there listening or watching?
I think I would echo what I said before. We really have the ability to push for change in drug policy and in criminalization. And the best way to do that is through engaging community, whether it's listening sessions or other ways, and having that drive our efforts. And so that's what I'd leave you with. Amen. Yes.
Amen, Kate. And also make sure you check out Vital Strategies at vitalstrategies.org and then also myliberation.org. If you have any questions, any way you want to get involved, we'll let you know because we are always looking for volunteers. When you're a nonprofit, you're always looking for you always can find work for you to do. If you heard something that you like, please reach out to us. But until next time, thank you so much, Kate. You tell Tony on them. They're coming next. Everybody's coming. You're coming back. We have so many different topics to cover in 2023. You know what I mean? Upcoming year. So until next time, everybody, thank you for joining us for another episode of Respect the Roots. And also remember to what? Respect the roots. Until next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Michigan Liberation Education Fund, C3, conducts grassroots organizing, leadership development, and civic engagement activities. Michigan Liberation, C4, and Michigan Liberation Action Fund, IE, are sister organizations.